Hi. In the previous video, we set up an FTP server and an FTP client, and we were able to connect from our Windows 7 machine to our Server 2003 machine. We also were able to expose the fact that FTP was a weak protocol and our username and our password were being sent plain text. So what we're going to do now is we're going to log back onto our Server 2003 machine, and we're going to now secure it using an sftp. sftp stands for Secure FTP, and it's using a protocol called SSH, which is going to basically give a level of encryption or create an encrypted tunnel that we can now communicate inside of that tunnel securely. So I'm going to go onto my Server 2003. I'm just going to open up my console. And I'm going to log onto the machine. Oops, no password. Just going to hit enter. So my IP address is still 35. And what I want to do is I want to connect up to the FTP tools that I've got in the tools folder, so that way we don't have to download anything. If I go to my CD drive, actually that may currently be connected. I'm just going to check and see what I've got connected here. Nope, it's Server 2003. So I'm gonna disconnect Server 2003. And then from the CD, what I want to do is I want to connect to an ISO image on a data store. And I'm in the Windows 2003. I'm just going to go up a directory, and I'm going to go inside the Tools folder. So in the Tools folder, I put together a DVD that's got some software that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go into this FTP software disk. And if I go inside the Tools CD, I see that I've got something called Setup SSH. So basically SSH is typically a Linux-based type of communication. What they did is started a SourceForge project where they took the existing Linux SSH and ported it over to Windows. Normally when people do like secured connections, Linux will use SSH and Windows will use VPN. But there is a benefit using SSH on a Windows machine to secure FTP, especially if the client is something like FileZilla, where it will support secured FTP connections. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to double click on this Setup SSH exe, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to click the next button. I'm going to agree to the terms and conditions. I'm going to go next. Okay, so I'm going to leave everything checked. I'm going to go next. Next. Okay, so it's giving me some information here. It's basically saying before we use OpenSSH, we're going to need to create a password file. We need to make sure that passwords are pulled out of the SAM that Windows uses and put into a passwd file format that can be read by OpenSSH. So I'm just going to say, okay, I know I need to do more work. And then I'm going to say finish. So at this point, if I go to my computer and I go to my C drive, and if I go inside my program files, I now have an OpenSSH folder. If I go inside that OpenSSH folder, I've got a bunch of directories. The very top one is bin, which stands for binary, which is basically programs. If I go in there, I see that they've given me a bunch of different command line programs that I can use. What these programs will do is they'll take my existing SAM information and allow me to convert it into a Linux format. So what I need to do is I need to open up a command prompt, and I need to navigate to this folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some DOS commands. I'm going to type in cd, which stands for change directory. I'm going to do a space, and I'm going to hit a backslash. The backslash means it's the root of the C drive. And then I'm going to type in program, P-R-O. I'm going to hit tab, and it will automatically fill out program files for me. So right after that double quote, I'm just going to hit a backslash, and I'm going to type in open OP, and I'm going to hit tab, and it automatically filled in open SSH. And then I'm going to do a backslash. I'm going to type in bin, tab. So it did cd space program files open SSH bin. If I hit enter, now I'm in that directory. So once I'm in this directory, there's a command called mkgroup. Alright, so if I type in mkg tab, and when you hit tab, it auto-completes it. And that's really nice. So if I, after the .exe, I need to do a space. And this is what's called an argument. I can do a -l. So the -l actually gets passed inside the exe at runtime, and then it will know that this is what you want to do. And -l is going to list all of our current groups. So if I hit enter, basically we've got all of these different groups. We've got a root, a backup, guest, network configuration, remote desktop. So those are all different groups we have. So instead of printing it to the screen, I want to print it to a text file. So I'm going to hit the up arrow, and when I hit the up arrow, it automatically types what I previously had. So after the -l, now a lot of students put a 1 in there. They say that looks like a 1, and I agree. A lowercase l looks very similar to a 1, all right, but it is an L. So after the L, I'm going to do a space, and I'm going to do a greater than, and then I'm going to do a space. Two greater thans basically is an output. It's saying instead of printing it to a screen, put it into this file. So now we need to specify the file. So right now, I'm currently in my bin directory. Okay, so I'm in this directory. I'm in it in my DOS command line, but really, if I take a look, /program bin, that's really where I'm running this program from. What I want to do is I want to do this up arrow, all right, which is called directory traversal. It's a .. The up arrow basically takes me back one directory. So I want to come into this directory. So from the command line, what I do is I do a .. backslash, not a forward slash, a backslash. So a .. backslash basically took me into this folder here. Now I need to actually put it into the etc folder, the etc folder. The etc folder is going to be where I'm going to end up putting it. So what I need to do is after that .. slash, I'm going to type in the etc backslash, and then I'm going to give this thing a name. I'm just going to call it group. And I'm not just making group up. Group is a real name that I need to use. So it's going to be a text file called group. It doesn't have an extension. A lot of Linux programs don't use extensions. In Windows, we use extensions like .txt or .doc. So we're just creating it a group. I'm going to hit enter. Now, I didn't get an error message. If you didn't get an error message, then everything's awesome. It's not going to give you any success. It'll only give you error messages. If you get an error message, you're just going to want to double check and make sure you've got this as being an L and that you've got the appropriate spaces in the right spots. So the .. slash etc group, if I were to take a look in here, which you don't have to, you can go on blind faith, but here I do see that I've got that group file now. So I'm going to create a password file. I don't have a password file in here now. So I'm going to do something very, very similar, but instead of doing the group, I'm going to do the password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in mkpa, and I'm going to hit tab. I was hoping it was going to say make password or make passwd.exe. It gave me a C because they provided the source code with it. I'm going to do a backspace and type in an E and hit tab. Now I got the exe. So I've got mkpassword exe. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a space -L and hit enter. So all of my users now just got displayed on the screen. So that's all the user information. We're going to do something almost identical. Now, what I could do is I could just take all of this and put it inside the appropriate file like we did for the group. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the up arrow. I'm going to add another argument. So these are arguments. The -L is an argument. And I'm going to use a -U, which is a user argument. And I'm going to do a space. And I'm going to type in web dev. And I'm going to hit enter. So instead of loading everybody in, I'm only going to load the web dev in. Now, in my opinion, this is a very smart move. So instead of giving everybody access to the SSH, we're giving just one individual. The one individual that needs to securely connect up to our computer, we're giving just that user the ability to log in. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so I hit my up arrow. So I've got mkpassword.exe space -L to list, space -U, space, and then I need to specify the user, web dev. Now I used a capital W and a capital D just because that's the way I created it when I created the original account. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a greater than, space, which is my output. So we're going to put this to a file. I'm going to do a .. // that way I'm getting to the right folder. etc is the folder. And then what we're going to call this thing is passwd, Passwd. That's it. It needs to be that file name in order to have the OpenSSH working correctly. So I'm just going to hit enter. And at this point, that's awesome. So we've got that password. So if I look in here, now I see I've got that password file. So at this point, we're almost done. I'm actually done with the command prompt. So I'm going to close my command prompt down. Okay, so I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to click on the start button. I'm going to go to my computer. I'm going to go to my C drive. I'm going to go to program files. I'm going to go to OpenSSH. Inside the OpenSSH, I'm going to go to the etc. So I've got C:\program files /OpenSSH /etc. In here, I've got that passwd file. So what I want to do is I actually want to modify that file. I don't want this user to go anywhere. I really want them to go into the www root folder. So when they SSH in, I want them to automatically connect up to the right folder. So in order to do that, we need to modify this file. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm just going to say open. And I'm just going to open this thing in WordPad. So when I open it in WordPad, it's actually colon separated. So the first thing is the username, colon, and then the next thing is what it's used by. And then we've got like GUIDs, and we've got special, hash tables, and just things that we don't fully understand. So once I get to the way end, so I took my scroll bar and I'm way at the end here, I see a colon, home, web dev, colon. So in Linux, they've got a special folder called the home directory, and then within the home directory, normally all the users have it. So in Windows, we have that users folder, and inside the users, we've got all of the individual users, and they've got their document stuff in there. SSH, that's the way this works. But what we're going to do is we're going to modify this a little bit, because I really don't want to have each user have their own space. I've only got one user, and I want them to go into the www root folder. So what I'm going to do is, right in front of that /home, I'm actually going to create a /, and then what I'm going to do is it's called sig drive. It's cygdrive. So the SIG drive is basically the emulation that's emulating the Linux SSH in our C drive. So in Linux you have like the HDA1. So the SIG drive is the equivalent of our hard drive. Now it's seeing our C drive as a folder. So it's going to be /C /inetpub /www root. And then I'm going to just delete this, the /home /web dev. So I'm just going to delete that. So when the user logs in, this is going to automatically say, go to this hard drive, which is our CYG drive, the SIG drive. Go to this folder, which is our C://. Go to this folder, which is our inetpub. Go to this folder, which is our www root. So at this point, I really think this is right. So I want you to double check and make sure. I'm going to highlight from colon to colon here. You need to have exactly this. If that's messed up in any way, this will not work. So it's going to be the SIG drive C inetpub www root. So with that done, what we can do now is we can save this file. So I'm just going to click on the floppy disk, and then I'm going to close my Windows down. Not the Windows, just close my existing Windows. And then what I want to do is I want to start the service. So SSH is a service that runs. Now if I were to reboot the machine, it would automatically start up the service. But I don't need to do that. If I click on the Start button, right click on my computer, and if I go to Manage, and we were here before. This is where we went to our internet settings and IIS. There's a service here. If I click on Services, and if I click on any one of these services, and I type in Open, I hit O, and it automatically popped me down to Open SSH Service. So right now it's set to automatic. Automatic means as soon as the computer starts up, gets rebooted, it'll start up the service. So there's really three different states. It can either be automatic, it can be manual, or it could be disabled. So when I harden a service, what I'll do is, or I harden a server, what I'll do is I'll find what services are not needed, and then I disable them. You cannot go through and just disable everything, otherwise you won't be able to log into the machine, and that's quite painful. So you just want to, and in future labs we're going to do some port scanning, and we'll figure out how to identify what services are running, and then we can figure out if those services are needed or not. For example, if I have like a media center down in my basement that's got videos and pictures and stuff like that, technically it doesn't need to have an FTP server running on it. If I'm running an FTP server, I could come in here and move it to disabled, so that way it won't be running anymore. Okay, so right now I'm not going to change it. It's left on automatic. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on the little start, or the start here, either one, and it's just going to start that service up for me. So if you didn't get an error message here, then things probably are going to be okay. So I'm just going to close our services down, and I'm going to just remind myself that my IP address is 10.7.66.35. So you're going to maybe have to do an IP config, especially if you've taken a break between labs. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can log on to this machine from my Windows 7. So I'm just going to open up my console. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up FileZilla. And before I do anything, I'm just going to see if I can still log in with traditional FTP. So if I run this and I've got my web dev and my IP address didn't change, so I can just click on this and I can still log in. I see my default HTML document, which is good. So now what I want to do is I want to see if I can log in using the SSH. So the way I do that is I'm going to type in the IP address 10.7.66.35. Username is web dev. Password is Tor. Now, instead of the port being 21, what it normally was, what we're going to do now is we're going to make that port 22. And by doing port 22, it's going to know that this is an SSH connection, and it's going to use an sftp. So if I do my quick connect, it automatically fixed it to do an sftp, and then it rearranged the host. So I'm just going to say OK. And it gives me a fingerprint. This is common. It's saying, hey, this is the host. Here's going to be our SSH RSA fingerprint that we're going to use. I'm going to say OK. And it's going to connect up, and it connected up to the server. It automatically took me to my www root. I see my default. So at this point, this is good. We connected up to our sftp server. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just grab a screenshot of this. So I'm going to open up Word. And I'm going to grab my Windows 7 screen here and just kind of move that a little bit. And I'm going to do my Alt print screen. And I'm just going to paste this in. So this is going to be one of the Word documents that I'm going to need, or one of the screenshots that I'm going to need, so I can see that I've got my SIG drive and all that's great. So now what I want to do is I want to go back down to my Start button, and I want to go to my Wireshark. And I'm going to start up the Wireshark by doing my network adapter. Then I'm clicking on the Start button. Got a whole bunch of traffic here, so to limit that, I'm going to do TCP dot port equals 22, and I'm going to hit enter. So now I'm just going to sniff on port 22. I'm going to just analyze that traffic. So I'm going to go back over to my FileZilla, and I'm going to do a quick connect. So it redid that connection. I can already see behind me I'm seeing stuff. So over here, if I scroll up here, I see my SYN packet, I see the SYN ACK packet, I see the following ACK packet. Now the protocol is saying, hey, we're using SSH 2.0, using OpenSSH 3.8, and it's using a PuTTY. And now at this point, we're going to do an ACK, and it's going to do a key exchange. It's doing this whole Diffie-Hellman, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the semester. We're going to go through encryption, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Diffie and Hellman, two math geeks that figured out a way of making public-private key cryptography. So it's a really good way of passing data. And everything here is completely encrypted. So all I'm seeing is encrypted packets. Nowhere do I see username. Nowhere do I see password. If I switch back over to port 21 and hit enter, I don't see anything. Nothing happened on port 21. So what's happened is when we used FileZilla, FileZilla used the OpenSSH, and it created an encrypted tunnel using OpenSSH, and then inside that tunnel it did FTP. But we don't see any of that because all we're seeing is the tunnel. Inside that tunnel, it's communicating with the server using FTP, and then we're able to surf all of the stuff. So this is going to be our second screenshot, is going to be this port 22. So I want to make sure I've got that. I'm going to wiggle my screen here, and I'm going to do my print screen. I'm going to put that inside my Word document. Okay, so I've got both of my screenshots for the lab. Now at the bottom of the lab, it's asking for a short paragraph, and it's saying write a short paragraph describing the benefits of using SSH. what are some other options other than SSH. So this is very similar to what you did in the previous project. Basically, the benefits, I mean, you can see the benefits. You can't see the password anymore, which is an obvious benefit. And there are other options. We could use WebDev, network connections. VPN is another good connection option. So there's a lot of different options. So just kind of throw something together, just describing, some of the benefits and other options. And if you can think of some options, that would be awesome. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this lab, and I will talk to you soon.